Richard Childress looked directly into the camera, and what came out of his mouth sent shockwaves through every corner of NASCAR. Not because he was polite, not because he was diplomatic, but because for the first time, one of the most powerful men in the history of this sport acknowledged something that the establishment has been trying to quietly ignore, and now they can't. Cleetus McFarland is no longer a YouTube story. He's a NASCAR problem they have to solve out loud. Here's what makes this moment genuinely dangerous for the sport. Richard Childress isn't some mid-level team manager with a hot take. This is the man who put Dale Earnhardt in championship-winning cars. This is the architect of one of the most decorated racing dynasties in American motorsports history. When Richard Childress speaks, boardrooms listen, sponsors shift, drivers pay attention. So when he chose to address Cleetus McFarland specifically, not ignore him, not laugh him off, but respond that tells you everything about how serious this situation has actually become behind closed doors. But wait, because the way Childress responded, that's where things stop making sense and start getting interesting. He didn't come out swinging. He didn't dismiss Cleetus. He didn't say what most traditional NASCAR insiders have been whispering in the garage. Instead, he chose his words with the precision of someone who knows exactly how much pressure is building and exactly how carefully it has to be handled. He acknowledged the audience. He acknowledged the attention. He acknowledged that millions of people who have never watched a green flag drop are now suddenly paying attention to NASCAR because of one guy with a camera and a loud car. And that acknowledgement, that's not a compliment. That's a warning wrapped in careful language. And if you blinked, you missed it. Think about what's actually happening beneath the surface here. Cleetus McFarland didn't go through the traditional path. He didn't grind through late models in the Southeast. He didn't spend years building a resume in the lower NASCAR series, the way drivers who sacrificed everything to earn their shot did. He built an audience, tens of millions of people, and now he's walking into spaces where those people follow him, and that changes the financial architecture of the entire sport in ways that make some very powerful people very uncomfortable. Here's the part that nobody is saying directly, but everyone inside the sport is thinking. If NASCAR starts valuing audience reach alongside lap times, then the rulebook everyone has been playing by for decades gets rewritten overnight. Sponsorship conversations change. Seat decisions change. The metrics that determine who deserves an opportunity change. And suddenly, a driver who spent a decade working his way up through every series, sacrificing years of his life for this shot, is competing for relevance not just on the track, but in the content algorithm. That's not a small thing. That's a fundamental shift in what NASCAR is. And Richard Childress knows it. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. Because the fan reaction to this didn't just split, it fractured. On one side, you have people who are genuinely excited. They see Cleetus as exactly what NASCAR needs: new energy, younger eyeballs, viral moments that traditional racing simply cannot manufacture on its own. They argue that the sport has been slowly losing cultural relevance for years, and that someone who understands digital attention is exactly the injection NASCAR needs to survive the next decade. And honestly, their argument has data behind it. But the other side isn't just nostalgic. They're angry. And their anger is specific. Because it's one thing to have an influencer do an exhibition run at a special event. It's a completely different thing to start hearing his name in serious conversations about full-time seats, about competitive opportunities, about a sport where other drivers gave everything they had to earn a fraction of the exposure Cleetus generates by posting a video. That anger is legitimate. And it's growing. What's happening inside the garage is even more telling, because the drivers aren't talking publicly, they're watching. And in NASCAR, when drivers go quiet on something, it usually means the stakes are higher than anyone wants to admit on the record. They understand something the fans debating online don't fully see yet. that this moment isn't really about Cleetus McFarland at all. It's about what NASCAR decides it is. It's about whether on-track performance remains the primary currency, or whether audience size becomes the new qualifying lap. Here's the deeper truth that Richard Childress was really circling without saying it directly. NASCAR has always survived by balancing two things in tension: competition and entertainment. The sport has bent those rules before. Personalities have always mattered. Sponsors have always chased stars as much as winners. But there's always been a threshold, a line where the racing itself had to be credible enough to justify everything built around it. And the question this moment is really forcing in boardrooms, in sponsor meetings, in conversations between team owners, is where that line sits now. Because it's moved, and everyone can feel it. Childress responded the way a chess player responds when an unexpected piece enters the board. He didn't knock it off immediately, he studied it, he acknowledged it, and he positioned himself carefully, because a man who has navigated NASCAR politics for 50 years understands that the wrong reaction to the wrong moment can cost you more than staying quiet. But make no mistake, that careful positioning is itself a statement. It means this is real enough to require a strategy. So where does this actually go from here? Because here's what nobody is talking about yet. If Cleetus McFarland continues building his NASCAR presence, testing, appearing, being seen in spaces that matter, the pressure on teams to make a decision doesn't stay theoretical for long. At some point, someone writes a check. At some point, a seat opens and a conversation happens. And when that moment arrives, every quiet opinion currently being kept behind closed doors becomes public. And that's when this stops being a conversation about one YouTuber and becomes a defining moment for what NASCAR chooses to be in the next era of sports media. Richard Childress has seen this sport transform before. He's watched it grow, shrink, rebuild, and redefine itself through every era. He's not afraid of change. But there's a difference between evolution and substitution. And right now, the sport is trying to figure out which one it's actually choosing. Because the answer to that question will shape every driver's career, every team's strategy, and every sponsor's decision for years to come. So ask yourself, this is Cleetus McFarland, the spark that forces NASCAR into a smarter, more modern version of itself? Or is he the pressure test that exposes exactly how fragile the sport's identity has become when it's challenged by something it never planned for? Because Richard Childress responding wasn't the ending of this story. It was the opening move. And the next one? That's where everything actually changes. Hit subscribe, because when this breaks wide open, you're going to want to have been watching from the beginning.